what if I told you that one of the most solid, most established concepts in all of modern psychiatry wasn't really that scientific at all? Today, we're asking a pretty provocative question about the diagnosis of schizophrenia. What is it actually built on? Okay, let's just dive right in. For decades, right, the diagnosis of schizophrenia has been treated like it's this unshakable scientific fact. But is it? We're about to investigate whether its foundations are solid as a rock or, well, something a lot more like sand. Our guide on this journey is Mary Boyle's critical analysis in her book. She basically argues that this whole massive concept rests on just two pillars, and we're going to kick the tires on both of them. First, the official rules they use for diagnosis. And second, the genetic evidence that's supposed to prove it's a real biological thing. So, first things first, the rules of the game. To really get what's going on, we got to look at the official rule book for American psychiatry. You've probably heard of it. It's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, or as everyone calls it, the DSM. A really pivotal moment came with the third edition, the DSM-3. This thing was a game changer. It brought in a super specific rule. To get diagnosed with schizophrenia, your symptoms had to be around for at least 6 months. And just like that, this one rule created this huge dividing line between what they called schizophrenia and other conditions that were seen as, less severe. Okay, but wait a minute. If you're going to build a scientific concept, a rule that specific has to come from somewhere, right? It needs some kind of solid proof. So where did they get that number? What data made them land on exactly 6 months as the magic number? Not 5, not 7, 6. Well, it turns out the manual itself points to one key piece of evidence. It's a study from all the way back in 1966 by two researchers, Astrup and Norick. The big claim was that their data proved that how long you had symptoms was a huge predictor of what would happen to you in the long run. So you know what we're going to do? Let's be good scientists and actually look at the data ourselves. And here it is. This is the key table from that very study. It's pretty straightforward, really. The columns going across the top show how long someone had symptoms before they went to the hospital. And the rows down the side show their outcome, years later, from recovered all the way down to severe deterioration. So take a good look. If that 6-month rule is legit, you'd expect to see a cliff, right? A huge, dramatic drop-off right after that first column, the one for under 6 months. But do you see one? Because as Mary Boyle points out, sure, there's a trend, but there is no sharp statistical break. There's no magic line where things suddenly fall off a cliff. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. Boyle argues that later, when the DSM authors were faced with this kind of flimsy evidence, they did something pretty clever. Instead of finding better data, they basically told a good story. They created what she calls a narrative of progress, wrapping the shaky roles in a big story about the past and the future, to kind of distract you from the fact that the evidence, right now, wasn't so great. All right, so that was pillar number 1. Now, let's move on to pillar number 2, the one that holds up the whole house of cards for a lot of people. The idea that schizophrenia is a proven genetic disorder. Now, the cornerstone of the whole genetic argument has always been twin studies. And the logic behind it is super simple, right? Identical twins, they share 100% of their genes. Fraternal twins share about 50%, just like any brother or sister. So, if this thing is really genetic, you would absolutely expect identical twins to share the diagnosis way more often than fraternal twins. Makes sense. And look, when you open up a textbook, this is exactly what you see. The pattern looks crystal clear. The concordance rate, which is just the fancy term for the chance that both twins get the diagnosis, is way higher for identical twins. The genetic link looks undeniable. Seems like a slam dunk, doesn't it? Well, not so fast. Boyle argues that if you stop looking at those neat little summary charts and you actually dig into the original research papers, oh my mess. We're talking about really crude methods. Sometimes they didn't even report how they knew the twins were identical. Major problems just get excused, and data that doesn't fit the story kind of gets massaged to create this, quote, impression of consistency. So, to be fair, researchers knew that twins don't just share genes, they share an environment, which messes things up. So they turned to what's supposed to be the gold standard for this kind of thing, adoption studies. The idea is perfect, right? You look at kids adopted at birth, and you can theoretically separate nature from nurture once and for all. But, and you might be sensing a theme here, Boyle finds another pretty troubling pattern. In one of the most important sets of adoption studies, the first pass at the data found nothing.
No significant difference. So what did the researchers do? They changed their approach. They invented a broader category, the schizophrenia spectrum, and then they started lumping different kinds of relatives together. And voila, by doing that, they managed to squeeze out a result that was statistically significant.
But here's the kicker. Boyle points out that if you simply undo what they did, if you split the relatives back out into their original groups, the statistically significant finding just disappears. Poof. It suggests the result wasn't some deep genetic signal, but maybe just an artifact of how they decided to slice and dice the numbers. Okay, so let's just pause for a second. This brings us to a massive question. If the evidence for the diagnostic rules is this shaky, and the evidence for the genetic link is full of holes, then why is the concept of schizophrenia so powerful? Why is it so incredibly resilient in our culture? Boyle's answer is fascinating. She says it's not actually about the evidence itself, it's about the story we tell about the evidence. Textbooks give you the clean highlight reel, not the messy reality of the research. Scientific papers will often gloss over weak results by talking about the amazing discoveries that are just around the corner. And then you've got powerful institutions like the DSM that just state these things as facts, with no references, creating this powerful illusion of certainty. It's a whole narrative machine that keeps the idea chugging along. And that leaves us with one final, really provocative thought. If the scientific pillars holding this thing up, diagnosis and genetics, are as wobbly as this analysis suggests, then what is actually holding the concept of schizophrenia together? What purpose is it really serving for us? For patients, for psychiatry, for society, if it's not a purely scientific one?